Well, welcome to Click for IB Biology. We are in the transport section of the syllabus, and we are now looking at the heart, which is the heart of a mammal, and indeed, of course, ourselves. So we've looked at arteries, capillaries, and veins, and now we're looking at the structure which maintains the propulsion of the blood around that system, the heart. So we're going to consider in this video the actual structure of the heart and the overall blood flow through the heart, leaving the cardiac cycle to a later video and study. Should you wish, in the description there's a PDF of the presentation, which you can then annotate yourself to keep notes. You'll find a quick quiz to test your understanding of the content of this video, and perhaps one or two other channel links. Let's consider, in the first instance, the external features of the heart. Most of the heart that you'll see is actually composed of the large pumping chambers, which are called the ventricles. And in this diagram here, this occupies most of the space below the dotted line. Running across the surface of the heart are the heart's own blood vessels called the coronary arteries. Now these are branches of the aorta carrying oxygenated blood to the heart tissue itself. We should understand that blood that passes through the heart does very little to oxygenate the cardiomyocytes, the heart muscle cells themselves. They need their own capillaries and their own arterial supply. And that starts on the surface, and then they dive down deep into the muscle of the heart, supplying those muscle cells with oxygen and nutrient. We'll be able to identify the major artery of the body, which is called the aorta, taking blood under high pressure to the organs. And we will also find the pulmonary artery, which takes blood obviously to the lung. Pulmonary refers to lung. So being an artery takes blood to the structure, okay, away from the heart, so that's the pulmonary artery. The pulmonary veins, of course, are returning blood from the lung. And here we've got the superior and inferior vena cava converging into one structure here. And these are the blood vessels which return blood from the head and from the lower part of the body. So these are the major blood vessels that you would see on an external structure of a heart. Now, if you're lucky enough to be able to observe a heart dissection, you may well be able to observe the following structures from a dissected heart. At the top, we call the top of the heart, when orientated this way, we call that the base, and the opposite end is called the apex of the heart. There are two receiving chambers at the top of the heart, and these are called the atria. Now the diagram which is presented as if a person is referring to their own heart. So this would be the left ventricle, the left side of a person's heart, not our heart, but their heart. So this is the left atria and the right atria. And these are the receiving chambers for blood returning to the body in veins. So that would be from the pulmonary vein on this side and from the vena cava on that side. This blood will then pass down into the ventricles on both sides, and the name of the valves which allow that blood to pass downwards are called atrio, as in atrium, ventricular, the atrioventricular valve. Older textbooks will refer to this as the bicuspid valve on the left with two flaps on the valve, whereas the tricuspid valve on this side, the right atrioventricular valve, would have three flaps. Blood then passes down and into the larger pumping chambers of the heart, as outlined here. And you'll notice that the left ventricle is considerably larger than the right ventricle. Blood going out of the left ventricle is being pressurized and pumped to all of the organs except the lungs. And of course, that would be the job of the right ventricle, to pump blood to the lungs. To get to the lungs, blood from the left ventricle passes through this valve. Now, this is called a semi-lunar valve. So that would be semi and lunar. And that refers to half moon shaped, and there's two, so those open up and allow the ejection of a pulse of blood into the aorta going to the body's organs, except the lungs. On the right side of the heart, blood which has been in here, when pressurized, ejects through the semi-lunar valve on this side into the pulmonary vein. I beg your pardon, that's incorrect. That's the pulmonary artery, as it's leading blood away from the heart. That would have to be an artery, and this would go to the lung tissue. There are other complications to do with heart structure, to do with why the valves are opening and closing, but those will be dealt with when we consider the cardiac cycle. For clarity, we're identifying here that these are the semi-lunar valves at the openings of the two arteries, and the atrioventricular valves sit between the atria and the ventricles, preventing backflow from the ventricles into the atria. So those would close and prevent backflow. On the right hand side here we have a flow diagram. If we start with the left side, blood returns from the pulmonary veins to fill up the left atrium. Blood returns from the body in the vena cava to fill up the right atrium. That blood then passes down into the right ventricle and left ventricle before being pumped out either towards the lung or towards the body's organs. We'll consider the actual mechanism and sequence of pumps and contractions when we look at the cardiac cycle. Here's a link to some of the subsequent videos that I've produced to guide you through the other stages of the syllabus, along with a subscription button that you could click if you like, and one or two other links to other channels and playlists.